The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Have the Commanders reached the breaking point with Terry McLaurin's contract negotiations? Dan Quinn unleashed a Where's Waldo yesterday, which is about as close as he gets to exploding, at least what I've been able to observe in the year plus that he's been the coach of the team. But it's a month since veterans were due to report to training camp. Terry McLaurin has yet to practice. This is, in fact, the final training camp practice today. We don't know if McLaurin is going to practice. He's certainly not going to play in the exhibition game Saturday. And the question now, with the season opening 2 weeks from Sunday, will Terry McLaurin be on the field as the Commanders open up against the Giants on September the 7th? I think it's very much in question right now. We'll get to that and more coming up today. There's a documentary about the Cowboys that's on Netflix. And yesterday I played part of a conversation with one of the producers who was on the Dan Patrick Show the other day. He said that they did 40 hours of interviews with Jerry Jones. And trust me, I've seen the first 2 episodes. I think it's a 7-part series. I watched the first 2 episodes last night. There is plenty of Jerry in this. And with all we know about the Cowboys, and if you're old enough to remember when Jerry bought the team in 1989 and followed the early success that they had, followed by the drought, the team now that has gone the longest without making a conference championship team, we know the Jerry story, and we know some of the backstories. But the way it's presented here, very, very entertaining. I will get to that coming up. But let's dive into what's going on here with Terry McLaurin. And, boy, it's been 5 weeks now, almost 6 weeks since he had that news conference at Eastern Motors where he expressed frustration. He said he had been disrespected. He had indicated that if he didn't have a contract extension, he wouldn't be out on the practice field, and so far he hasn't done that. He was not on the sidelines for the home exhibition game against Cincinnati this past Monday. It's reached a point where I could not have imagined it would have reached with Terry McLaurin. Everything we've observed about him since he got here in 2019, total mensch. Exactly the kind of person and player that they've wanted to build this organization around, especially when Dan Quinn took over, where he said, I want to do hard ass with good people. And Terry McLaurin is good people, and he's a good player. Is he an elite wide receiver? No, he's not. And he's going to be 30 years old next month. And what has been reported is that what he and his agent came up with shocked the team. They didn't think that he could necessarily even ask for that, much less get it. And they are very far apart. It does not appear that there's going to be resolution to this soon, and it's getting late in the game. So anyway, he was removed from the physically unable to perform list this week, which would have made him eligible to practice yesterday. He did not, but it took some digging by the reporters who talked to Dan Quinn at his news conference yesterday, starting with, okay, what is the Terry situation?
The return to play part that's the good news. So we're out of the rehab phase with Terry. His ankle's good. He's healthy. So now it's a return to play. What goes into all that at that position specifically, like the max speeds, the decelerations, the route tree of going through that. So that's kind of the good news of where we're at. It's just, conditioning and football and returning to play. And so almost all the guys are at some phase along that way. You're going to see McGee at practice. You're going to see Baptiste, they just have kind of gone through that process as well, where they're out of the rehab portion of their, returning to play. And then it's back into like the football simulated work. So, yeah, we're excited that, he's back and getting better conditioning and getting things going.
So Quinn talked for 48 seconds there. Are you crystal clear on whether or not Terry McLaurin is going to be back on the practice field? I wasn't after hearing this. Neither was Ben Standig, who is now at Substack and has covered the team on a daily basis for years. He circled back to this after a couple more questions, and here's The first time, again, I've watched just about every news conference that Dan Quinn has done since he was named head coach in January of 2024. This is the first time, and there hasn't been a lot to get angry about, let's face it. I mean, last year was a magical season and a magical ride with Jaden Daniels, but things are getting a little bit tense here. A little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit tense. And listen to how Dan Quinn answers Ben's question.
Dan, just to clarify, will we see Terry today out here doing anything?
Not at the practice portion. He had a big part of the run that went along today. I'm not going to play Where's Waldo, guys, all right, moving forward. So just so we're clear on that. So Terry's return to play format is no different than any of the other players. And so I'm not jumping at you, Ben, but I wanted to make sure, like, the next question doesn't go down this line. He's healthy, which is now a good step to, like, getting closer to being back on the field. So you'll see that earlier than later. I don't have a date circled on my whiteboard in my office, this day for him, this day for him. But, yeah, the good news, we're getting closer to that for sure.
Yeah, getting closer. Again, no definitive answer on when he's going to practice, even though he's off the physically unable to perform list. I mean, I think it's at the point now where the organization is saying to McLaurin and his agent, look, we love you, but we're not going to go way over value to pay you. You know, we're in the 20s, you're in the 30s. We'll get closer to the 30s, but you got to get yourself in the 20s. You got to be realistic about this. And if he's not, it's going to cost Terry McLaurin a lot of money, because if he doesn't sign the extension, again, the team is in the driver's seat. They can have him play out this year at $22.5 million. I know he's the 20th highest paid wide receiver in the league at that rate, and there's no future guarantees. God forbid he suffers a serious injury. He's got no more money coming his way after this season. But if he plays well, they can franchise him. And then he's 32. And if he's great, they may say, Guy Gesund, go get yourself a deal. But if he's starting to fall off, as wide receivers at that age generally do, advantage Washington. They haven't had to pay out the long-term deal. They haven't had to have the guaranteed money along with an extension. So I think that Terry and his agent at this point need to get a dose of reality. I think at the beginning, the court of public opinion was clearly in McLaurin's favor, and he had built up that goodwill. But as time has passed, and there's been more reporting on this, including Diana Rossini, who's very well connected around the league and has canvassed a number of general managers and personnel people, and all of them have said, you know, you love the guy, but he's not a $30 million plus a year wide receiver. He's just not. And the team can't set the precedent with this. This is the first big contract negotiation that Adam Peters has done. He's brought in veteran free agents on various deals, some of them multi-year deals, most of them one-year deals. He hasn't had to deal with something like this as the general manager yet. And the precedent he wants to set is, you know, I'm not going to roll over for this. And, you know, they also have to look at it from the standpoint of the other players on the team, too. Like, you know, if we're going to play hardball with you, we're also going to play hardball with a star here. And we're going to get the right deal. We're going to be fair with him, but we're not going to give him something that's way out of line. And I don't know the exact number that he's asked for, but you're hearing DK Metcalf numbers. Well, DK Metcalf is over that $30 million a year threshold, but he's 2 years younger. And that matters. McLaurin says it doesn't because he didn't play really his first 2 years at Ohio State, was a redshirt. And then, to his credit, you know, has been on the field. He hasn't missed a game because of injury in 5 years. That's true. But Father Time remains undefeated. And we'll talk more about this coming up. Also, Brian Robinson excused from practice yesterday. It's a foregone conclusion that he's gone. Either he's going to be traded, they can find somebody to take him, or he's going to be released. And at $3.4 million left on his contract, unless the team is willing to absorb some of that money, I would imagine he's going to be cut. And the cut down day, the roster has to be down to 53 by 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. So They will do some shopping of Brian Robinson, see if anybody takes him. I think it might be interesting to see what happens after the round of exhibition games this weekend. Might there be some injuries? Somebody might be interested, but I think time has run out on him. I love what-if stories in sports. What if Muhammad Ali hadn't missed 3 prime years after refusing to go into the military? What if Jack Kent Cooke had handled things differently and John Kent Cooke had taken over as the owner of the Redskins instead of the dastardly Dan Snyder? How would things have been around here for the past quarter century before Josh Harris rescued this mess? There are so many of them out there, and one of them is the Dallas Cowboys and Jimmy Johnson. That if the egos of Jimmy and Jerry Jones hadn't clashed after they had incredible success together, winning back-to-back Super Bowls, what if they had stayed together? What if Jimmy would have been allowed to continue to run the team, which is what Jerry wanted control of? What if he'd been able to do that? How many more Super Bowls would they have won? Even without Jimmy and Coach Gunsmoke, Barry Switzer, who was known for showing up for work at 10 o'clock in the morning, they still won another one. That's how much talent he left behind. And it's one of the things that's covered in this new documentary that's out on Netflix called, well, America's Team. That's, what they've been known as for close to 50 years. I think 1976 is when they rolled that out as part of the NFL Films documentary, and they kind of embraced that. And for better or for worse, they have been America's team to hate, America's team to love. But no team in the NFL, and it's incredible, too, since they won their last Super Bowl in 1996, that they have been as dominant in the news as they have been. And a lot of it has been on the back of Jerry Jones' personality. And as we played yesterday, one of the producers was on the Dan Patrick Show this week, and he said that they had done 40 hours of interviews with Jerry Jones for this documentary. 40 hours! Even if you could get other owners to talk to you for 40 hours, would it be worthwhile to get 40 hours of content? Jerry's that guy, even in his 80s. He can still give you great sound bites. And here's a little sampling. This is the trailer for the America's Team documentary out on Netflix that they put out.
The road to a championship is never paved smoothly. It's always paved with peaks and valleys.
This is a soap opera 365 days a year.
Texas is football country. The hole in Texas Stadium so God could watch his favorite team, the Cowboys.
When I bought the team, I was Darth Vader.
Dallas fans aren't happy.
Last year, they were 1-15.
I said, Dad, I don't know anything about running a football team. And he looked me in the eye and he said, neither do I.
We were gambling my family's whole fortune, so I had to take risks. And it started with Jimmy Johnson.
Get part of this, man. Asthma, Mike. Get over there on that other field and have some asthma.
And he made practice hell so the game is heaven. We were ready.
Showtime.
All of a sudden, it was a runaway train.
Oh, baby!
Everywhere we went, they were icons.
We played hard, and then we played hard.
With that success, you also get disruption.
Police officer came to me.
And they pulled the gun. Open the door right now!
Jerry is that disruptor, that innovator.
You're not much of a gambler unless you're going against a popular trend.
No one ever thought Jerry had the guts to fire Jimmy.
You don't know half the stuff that was happening. Playing for the Cowboys is different.
The most valuable sports franchise in the world.
No matter what they say, they can't prepare you. You just got to experience it.
And the only thing else I got to say is, how about this, Cowboys?
We do it our way, baby.
We do it our way, baby. It starts with this, and this is, you may know this, Jerry Jones made his money in the oil business, speculative oil, drilling. And, you drill a hole, and sometimes it gushes, and sometimes you get nothing, and everything you spent to drill the hole goes down the tubes. Now, Jerry says that he had gotten himself into about $15 million worth of debt in the 80s. Now, think about that. That's almost 40 years ago, what $15 million was then and what it is now. So he was heavily into debt, and he was worried. He said his wife's father had to come talk to him because he thought he might harm himself. That's how serious it was. So, typical of the life of Jerry Jones, who's an all-in kind of guy, he said he borrowed $800,000. This is the most he'd ever spent to drill a hole, and he spent $800,000 to do this. If it failed, he may have had to go belly up. He may have had to go back to the grocery business or something like that. But it gushed $100 million. I mean, just think about that. It gushed $100 million worth of oil, and you hear him talk about, you hear the gurgling, you hear the noise, and it's gushing. And so he took that money, and he took it to what he wanted to do his whole life, and that was to buy the Dallas Cowboys. And he happened to find out that Bum Bright, who'd gotten himself into serious financial trouble, had to sell the team. And so he went to see Bum Bright about buying it. And he said it got to $150 million. I think that was the selling price. You think about them now, they're worth like almost $13 billion. But in 1989, the selling price was just over $150 million. And Jerry says they get to the point where they're negotiating the last $300,000. And Bum Bright says, I'll flip you for it. And Jerry says, okay. He flips the coin. Jerry loses, but guess what? I got the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, it's compelling. Jerry gives great sound bites. That's why this works. I don't know if there's another owner that could do this. Jack Kent Cooke was very good at this, but, Cook's been gone for 30 years. But Jerry knows how to do this. Jerry knows how to do documentaries. That's why this works. Now, the what-if story. The what if Jerry and Jimmy didn't butt heads? Because think about this. They were only together for 5 years. 5 years. Started in 1989, 1-15 to back-to-back Super Bowl champs. In 5 years, Jimmy Johnson won as many Super Bowls as Tom Landry did in 29. 29 years as coach of America's team, he won 2 Super Bowls. Jimmy won back-to-back. And as the story goes, they were at the owners' meetings, a lot of reporters hanging out. Jerry likes to hang with reporters, had a few drinks, and he said, 500 other guys could coach this team. And when Jerry was asked to back that up the next day, he didn't deny he said it. So once it hit the papers, that was the beginning of the end. And Jimmy left, and Jerry turned to Barry Switzer, who had enough talent that he couldn't even screw it up. He got him to the NFC Championship game his first year. They lost to San Francisco, but in the comeback the following year, they played the 49ers again, got to the Super Bowl, and won their first one, beating the Buffalo Bills. Excuse me, that was the one. That was when they beat Pittsburgh in 1996. But the whole Jimmy thing is such a big part of this, as you would think, especially the first 2 episodes that I saw. And it deals with that question of, how could it fall apart like this? Because you had the makings of a big-time dynasty. It wasn't that they didn't have free agency then. Free agency didn't come in until the 1993 season. So while he was building this team, he was building it with draft picks, mostly draft picks. Now, they made a couple of trades. Charles Haley, who they got from the 49ers. This is another part of it you got to see. I'd never heard this story before. Haley got fed up with being in San Francisco, walked into the general manager's office, and urinated on his desk. Yeah, that's how you get out of that situation. Jerry took him on. Haley turned out to be a key part of what they did. He had won a Super Bowl in San Francisco, and now he was going to win again with them in Dallas, and he's also featured in this. But Michael Irvin now hosts a podcast. He had Troy Aikman on the other day, and they talked about the documentary and their roles in it. And it was Irvin started the conversation about Jimmy, and he had played for Jimmy at Miami, so he knew him, University of Miami, the U. and that he said he had been talking to Eric Williams, who also was a star offensive lineman on those teams, and he was, reminiscing and thinking about the same what if Jimmy had stayed and how many championships they would have won.
We could have won 5 in a row if we had kept Jimmy. We could have won 5 in a row. That was his thought. That's what we were talking about. And then Big E said, I don't know, Michael. Jimmy would have drove us crazy for 5 in a row. He was like, I don't know if we could have gotten through 5 in a row at the pace Jimmy was going. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was incredible.
He might be right. I would have liked to have seen what that might have looked like. What I've always said about it is, to say we would have won this, or we certainly could have. I think when you start saying, yeah, we would have done that it takes away a little bit as to how hard it is to do it. Winning a Super Bowl is hard. I'm often asked, how come so few teams repeat? And I said, because just winning the first one's a challenge in itself, and then to have it all come together again. But as you know, Jimmy was Jimmy was a great coach, but he was also a great evaluator of talent. And we had some amazing players that were drafted, some late round picks. You think of guys like Leon Lett, 7th round pick. He goes on to be an all-pro player. So I think we would have been competitive and with a chance to win it for probably our entire careers, which would have been fun to have seen how that story might have been written.
Right. And I do believe, because I even in the documentary you talked about that moment that Jimmy was ready to give us some credit, because he drove us like dogs.
Yeah.
He drove us like stop playing. He drove us like dogs. And we were all waiting on that attaboy moment. We were waiting on that attaboy moment, And I think it would have come. It would have come in sooner or later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sooner or later. And if Jimmy just got us through the first 3 or the first 4, we could have maintained one for another one. That's what my mind was going with,
Yeah.
But we got to let it. And Troy, even that, Roy, that's Big E said to me this too. He said, Mike, even watching it was the first time I was able to let go some things. Like he said he was so affected by the car accident up to this point, until he watched that documentary. He was just affected by it. And there's a lot of things that went on, you think about now, you go back, and I was like, wow, man. Wow. We were young.
Yeah.
Jimmy had so many players coming in and out of there. You didn't know. I don't care if you were first pick, last pick, if you were going to be there the next week. We watched so many people walk in and out that door.
Yeah.
That was crazy. Those were crazy times.
Jimmy was, Jimmy was my father. I talk about it in the documentary. My father's still with us, but he was my dad was tough. And when you walked in the door of our house, you walked a little bit on eggshells to see what kind of mood he was in, to see if you could relax. And that's how Jimmy was. When you walked into the facility, everybody kind of wanted to check the temperature of Jimmy and is Jimmy good? And if Jimmy's good, I'm good. But if Jimmy's not good, nobody's good,
He kept it that way too. He kept it that way. I think he kept it that way. So I love in the documentary where you guys talk about, the relationship that you started and with Coach and how that thing even started at first, because Coach put everybody through it,
Yeah.
He came to me and told me about Dave Shula wanting to get rid of me. And he said, I got to make a decision. And he said, Michael, I play with you. I'm going to decide to stay with you and get a new coordinator. Thank God he went and got Norv Turner. We can both talk about that some other time. But he put everybody in that blender. He went and drafted Steve Walsh, my old quarterback. And then even talked about this in the thing when we talked about it in the documentary, stuck with Steve Berline. But ultimately, you guys became great friends. And talk to me about that.
Yeah, you know what, Michael, it is the relationship I'm most proud of because, as you know, I'd known Jimmy since I was about 14 years old. He was recruiting me at Oklahoma State. He knew of me as a sophomore. I was his #1 recruit when I was coming out of high school. And I didn't go to Oklahoma State, of course. And then he left. Even if I'd gone there, I wouldn't have played for him because right afterwards he went to Miami. He recruited me in Miami. So I'd known him a long time. And then I get drafted by him and I was excited. And then when they made when they brought in Steve Walsh, it affected our relationship. And then with us not winning, it affected everyone's relationship with him. But, there were times it was such a bumpy road early that we went through stretches where we really didn't even communicate. We didn't talk much at all. And then the last 2 years as he was our head coach, he and I got along really well. When the fish tank, he claims like that was the galvanizing moment. That's not quite accurate, but it was part of our relationship. And in '93, his last year with us, he would come over on the off day on Tuesdays. He'd bring a 6-pack of Heinekens and he'd sit in my bedroom looking at the fish tank, drinking beer, and he and I would just communicate. And so I really hated to see him leave as the head coach because we were really close. But when we got closer was when he went to Fox, and then I was also at Fox. And so we spent a lot of we were able to spend even more time together after our careers in football. And Mike, the greatest honor I've ever been given. Going into the Hall of Fame myself is a great honor, but the best honor I've ever been given was when he asked me to present him in the Hall of Fame. I never would have imagined. Can you imagine the relationship that we had in 1989, 1990, that one day Jimmy Johnson would ask me to be his presenter for the Hall of Fame? So I go and see him once a year in Florida. I talk to him quite regularly. And I absolutely love him. You're on that list as well. There's few people on this earth that I love as much as him and you and others. But those, and as far as men go, to where you tell them, hey, I love you, and it's unique, and I'm really proud of where we are right now in our relationship.
That's Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman on the documentary that's out on Netflix, America's Team, about the Cowboys. A couple of follow-ups. The Fish Tank, if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, they're talking about the 93 season and how they bonded, Jimmy and Troy, and they actually bonded starting with a conversation, according to Jimmy. I guess Aikman has a little bit different view of this, but they were just talking about other things than football, and they got around to fish tanks. And Jimmy said, I like to have fish tanks in my house because it relaxes me to watch the fish. And then it got to the point where Jimmy said, hey, would you like me to give you one? So he delivered a fish tank to Troy's house, and that's where, they started to bond on off days where they would sit around and talk about life and football while watching fish swim in the tank. If that's the kind of thing that turns you on, well, there's that. But the other thing that I would mention about the Troy Aikman relationship with Jimmy Johnson, and again, you get the sense here that it was rocky at the beginning, and the fact that they used a supplemental draft pick to take Steve Walsh from the University of Miami after they had taken Troy Aikman number one. You'd think, okay, we got our franchise quarterback here. What do we need another quarterback? Why would we waste a draft pick for the following year to take another quarterback? Well, that could have been, sort of an FU from Jimmy to Troy, because he did try to get him to Oklahoma State. Troy ultimately went to Oklahoma, got hurt there, transferred to UCLA, but by that time, Jimmy was at Miami, and he wanted to bring him there, and he stiffed him again. And so he finally got him with the Cowboys, so that could have been part of it. And then I don't know if we'll ever get an answer on this, but this has baffled me for 30 years. 1995, Redskins were bad. It was the second year under Norv Turner. They were rebuilding. They were 3-13 the year before. They had totally turned over the roster, the aging roster, after they'd won the Super Bowl after the 1991 season. And the Cowboys came in for a game October 1st, so it was relatively early in the season. And this was the second year under Coach Gunsmoke, Barry Switzer. And the word was out that he and Troy were button heads because Barry Switzer didn't understand how to coach in the NFL. He'd been very successful in college, mainly with his recruiting. He was a great recruiter. I don't know how good of a coach he was, but in the NFL it was different. You had everybody had the same access to talent. You had a 53-man roster, not a 100-man roster, all those things. So in this game, Aikman goes out real early with a calf injury. Now, a calf injury could be really serious, as it was for Phil Simms, who went out in the 1990 season with a calf injury that ended his season. That's why Jeff Hostetler, the backup quarterback, beat the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. Yeah, it was that was the reason. It was a calf injury. He was out. So you think, calf injury, whoa, that's serious. Well, somehow Aikman, 1 week later, started against the Green Bay Packers, threw for 319 yards and 2 touchdowns and a win. he seemed fine a week later. And the story that was out, and I don't know if it'll ever be confirmed, but it was that because they were playing in Washington, because Norv Turner was the coach of the Redskins, and Troy loved Turner, he credits him for turning his career around when he became offensive coordinator of the Cowboys, and he wanted Jerry Jones to see his team get beat by Norv Turner, so he would try to hire away Norv Turner from the Redskins so he could coach the Cowboys and get rid of Barry Switzer. I don't know if that'll ever get answered, but it is mysterious to see him go down with a calf injury. Wade Wilson finished up the game, and then to play 7 days later, a full game, and play well and beat a good team in the Green Bay Packers. I don't know. It just as Ken Beatrice used to say, it boggles, and that might be part of the backstory with what happened with Troy Aikman post-Jimmy. We'll never know, I guess. All right, coming up, more on the running back situation with the Commanders and what's happening with Brian Robinson, and the quarterback go-round in the NFL taking an interesting turn in Indianapolis. That and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. When I say the name Sister Jean, this might not jog your memory immediately, but remember Loyola of Chicago basketball in the NCAA tournament, and this elderly nun in a wheelchair who was sort of the inspirational figure for the team, and they made it back a couple of years later, and she was late 90s. You know how old Sister Jean is today? Sister Jean is 106 years old and looks exactly like she did when she first came to consciousness, I think public consciousness. I think it was 8 years ago, right? 8 years ago when we first saw Loyola of Chicago and they're making a deep run. I don't think they made the Final Four, but they did make the Elite Eight at least once, maybe twice. I mean, it's amazing. And the pictures of her, she looks great, looks the same as she did. She's remarkable. Think about this. She was born, Sister Jean was born August 21st, 1919 in San Francisco. Okay? San Francisco was basically formed because of the gold rush. Well, at that point, we were 63 years removed from the start of the gold rush. So it's possible that people who came to San Francisco for the gold rush in the mid-1800s were still alive when Sister Jean was born in San Francisco. She graduated high school in 1937, and here she is, still very much alive. And who knows if Loyola Chicago makes another run in the NCAA tournament, she's going to be a story at the age of 106. That is absolutely crazy. Wow. All right, let's get to the Commanders. If you were with us in the first hour, we played this. This was Dan Quinn yesterday at his news conference, and the Terry McLaurin questions sounds like are starting to wear on him, and I think the whole situation is wearing on the organization. I think they have essentially had enough at this point. McLaurin and his agent are asking for money, which is just not in line with a player of his age and abilities should get. Not only is he turning 30 next month, he's really, really good, really, really valuable to this team, but he's not a top 5 receiver. He's just not. And he's looking for DK Metcalf money. Well, DK Metcalf was in the same draft, but he's 2 years younger. Terry McLaurin took a redshirt year. And Metcalf came out after the minimum of 3 years in college. So it's a little bit different, and they're just not going to cross that $30 million threshold. So after answering a question about McLaurin coming off the physically unable to perform list the other day and being eligible to practice, where he got to the point of saying, it's looking good, he's healthy, but didn't really answer the specific question, is he going to practice? This was the news conference before practice yesterday. So this is the follow-up, and a natural follow-up to this. I think Ben Standing absolutely had to ask this question, which he did, and we got for the first time that I've ever seen, a little bit of chafe from Dan Quinn, and it sounds like he and the organization have had enough.
Dan, just to clarify, will we see Terry today out here doing anything?
Not at the practice portion. He had a big part of the run that went along today. I'm not going to play Where's Waldo, guys, all right, moving forward, so just so we're clear on that. So Terry's return to play format is no different than any of the other players. And so I'm not jumping at you, Ben, but I wanted to make sure, like, the next question doesn't go down this line. He's healthy, which is now a good step to, like, getting closer to being back on the field. So you'll see that earlier than later. I don't have a date circled on my whiteboard in my office, this day for him, this day for him. But, yeah, the good news, we're getting closer to that for sure.
Okay, so that was a signal to the media. Okay, I've had enough. We're going to see. But, season opener is 2 weeks from Sunday. He has yet to practice with the team. I don't know whether he's going to practice today. Dan Quinn, I guess he's due to talk to the media today. Maybe not. Maybe he won't talk until after Saturday. So there's no way that you're going to see McLaurin play Saturday anyway in that noon game against the Ravens. That's not going to happen. But it's getting time. The veterans were due in a month ago. He's been there for a month. Well, he actually reported 4 days late, but he's been there working out on the side. Has yet to practice with the team. And I just, could it happen that he doesn't practice or he practices just a few times and plays in the Giants game? Yeah, I think so. And boy, if he holds out in the regular season, then it rarely gets to that because of the amount of money that you get with a game check. That $22.5 million that he gets, it's divided 17 ways. So if you miss one of those 17 payments, that's over $1 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And I'm sure he wants to be out on the field. That trade request, that was ridiculous anyway. Nobody's going to give up big assets for him. And on top of that, they're not going to give him the contract extension that he wants. That's just they're too many good receivers. And you can find them. And you can find them like they found Terry McLaurin in the third round. And it's just not worth. There's not a team out there that's one really great wide receiver away. It just is not the case. He's a great player, great teammate, great person, great leader, but there's a price for everything. All right. Also, this is no surprise, but from the answer that Quinn gave, it's over for Brian Robinson. He was excused from practice yesterday. The only question is he going to be traded or cut? The cut-down day is next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Rosters have to be down to 53. If they can't make a deal, he's going to be cut. That leaves the rest of what they call now the running back room. Here's Quinn on what he told those competing for that position.
They're big guys. They know what's at stake, and that's what I like seeing in the game, prove it in competition. And I knew this is a very competitive group. Fortunately, at the spot, it looked no further than like Austin Ekeler and Jeremy McNichol of like what a pro's pro would look like. They're the absolute standard, and for those in the room that's covered those two, they know exactly on the field, off the field, their drill work, their special teams play. They're just an epitome of, kind of the commander way, that way we want to get down at running back and just at football.
He did not mention Chris Rodriguez, who it would appear has taken over that power spot for Robinson. He had a 40-yard run the other night against Cincinnati, and this was Rodriguez, and they're all well coached on this. Don't say anything inflammatory. Don't say anything that would lead you to believe, okay, this is my job now that Robinson is gone. So this is Chris Rodriguez playing it right down the middle.
At the end of the day, we're all focusing on ourselves. We're all trying to make the team. The more, energy that we focus into, not knowing what's going to happen, we're really not being our best self. So, I think everybody in the room are just focusing on yourself right now and trying to be a better player.
To that point, obviously you're competing to try to make this 53-man roster, right? So how do you approach these next couple of practices, this preseason game, knowing that you're fighting for a roster spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just believing in myself, going out there playing full speed, doing what I was doing. I don't think you need to change anything. Don't need to be a Superman. I'm still human. I still got to go out there and just compete at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think he's going to play on Saturday. I think he's going to get some snaps. Austin Ekeler will not, a veteran. I think he's gone into his 10th year now, 10th or 11th year. And Ekeler is a veteran, has seen these questions before, has heard these questions before, and answers just like a veteran.
Can't always control the name on the front of the jersey, but you always represent the name on the back. And so no matter what, no matter where you're at, make sure that's right. Control what you can control.
And the guy who probably has had more to do with pushing Brian Robinson out the door than anyone else, they call him Bill. He's got a different first name, but he likes to go by Bill. Bill Croxy, also Robinson, Bill Croxy Robinson, who has been, again, well-schooled on this, even though he's just a rookie. 7th-round pick from Arizona. He scored the touchdown the other night, and he understands exactly how to answer this question.
And I know you and B-Rob seem to have developed a good relationship. We've seen you guys laughing a lot during camp. The possibility of him maybe not being on the team this season or being excused right now, how does that impact you getting ready for this year?
B-Rob, he's definitely my dog, my guy, on and off the field. I mean, he's taught me a lot. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's all. That's all I'm going to say. He's my dog. He's helped me. I'm thinking I'm saying too much, so I'm going to shut up on that. So, Brian Robinson, once he's off the roster, I mentioned this the other day. This is stunning, and well, maybe it should be stunning. It's an indication of how poorly this roster was put together during the Ron Rivera eras, and how much they whiffed on draft picks. Sam Cosmi, one of the few that they hit on, and he got a second contract. He's hurt now. He's injured in that playoff game against Detroit, and Dan Quinn said yesterday that he is tracking to possibly be able to play in the opener, which is just amazing. That's less than 9 months after the injury, and he could be back on the field for what used to be at least a year, and that's not the case anymore. So that would be remarkable if he's back. I like backstories, and you like to hear how these things came together. So Steve Tasker, who was a great special teams player with the Buffalo Bills, he played a long time with them, has gone on to do radio and television in Buffalo. He's done national TV on CBS. I've met him a couple of times. Really a good guy, and really understands how to articulate the game and tell stories. So these are stories. I love these backstories of the days gone by. And I've said many times that what Marv Levy, who, by the way, just turned 100, he and I have the same birthday. He was born earlier than I was, but he just turned 100. Marv Levy turned 100 years old, still very much with it, was at the Hall of Fame over the weekend. He's in the Hall of Fame and should be. And I think what he and the Buffalo Bills did was amazing. They made it to 4 straight Super Bowls. I know they lost them all, but the devastation of losing a Super Bowl carries a hangover into the next season, and it's very difficult to get back. Few teams have ever done it, but he managed to do it 4 straight times, which is absolutely incredible. But Tasker was a key player on that, and he talked to Rich Eisen yesterday. I'm not sure why he was on. Maybe he's promoting something, but he was on, and he talked about how this dynasty, and it's a dynasty. If you make 4 straight Super Bowls, I don't care if you don't win one, that's a dynasty. Nobody else from the AFC over a 4-year period made the Super Bowl other than the Buffalo Bills. So I'm impressed by that. And this is Tasker on how it all came together starting in the late 80s.
We went 12-4 in 88.
Right.
And it felt a little bit like we caught lightning in a bottle, Certainly we had some talent. We had a bunch of Hall of Famers on the crew, but we were kind of missing some ingredients maybe, and it was hard for a guy like me to tell. At the end of 1989, our team was known as the Bickering Bills in that season. We had some guys like Jim and Bruce and Thurman, Cornelius Bennett, a bunch of guys, and we had a bunch of talent, but we didn't have any chemistry, didn't have any culture, didn't have any, like that. And they were bickering, man. They didn't like each other. They were, it It was not a. It was my least favorite season in my entire career.
No kidding.
And then at the end of that season, Jim Kelly, bless his heart, just reached out and said, "Listen, talk to Bruce, Cornelius Bennett, Thurman, Kent Hull, Daryl Talley, some key guys.
Yeah.
And he said, dudes, we're in this together. So when we get home tonight after this game, why don't you come over to the house and hang out a little bit, and we'll start hanging." So when those guys started breaking down the walls of their personal lives and started being friends, because they were great players.
Yeah.
And they started to be friends, and that changed the entire vibe of our team. And those last 3 games of '89, we lost in the wild card round in Cleveland in one of the great games ever, when Bernie and Ronnie Harmon dropped a pass late in the game. Clay Matthews picked Jim off at the very end to seal it. It was a fantastic game. And after that season, we really felt like we turned the corner. Marv made some very shrewd releases and signings in that offseason, and we came back and went to 4 straight Super Bowls from that point on. At the end of '89, we went through some really hard growing pains and came out of it right at the end of that season pretty good. And it carried over, and that team became what it was.
I mean, I'll ask Jim next time he comes on, but can you add any context to what caused Jim to just say, you know what, heck, I'm just going to call everybody up, invite them over?
You could feel the tension. You could feel the tension in the locker room. And for whatever, and Jim was one of 5 sons. So he knew what it was to be in a group, and have strife, when you fight with your brothers, that kind of thing. And he just dropped his guard and said, "Listen, there's no reason for us to be a team like this." And those other guys were all about it. Bruce, Cornelius, Kent Hull, Daryl Talley, they were all about it. And they kind of put their arms around. Jim came over, they, downed a couple bottles of wine, and then it happened. Then it started happening every week. They got together at Jim's every week, and then it turned into this post-game thing that really took on this mythic status. Jim, he was single back then. He had this huge house over in Orchard Park, and after every home game, he said he invited the entire team to his house.
Wow.
And he'd feed them. He had a bar, and he had this bar in the bottom of his house. I mean, a real bar, like with a dance floor and a pool table and the whole thing. And so everybody showed up at his house, and then you'd have, like, my mom and dad would come in, or my brothers would come in, or all my family members or college buddies would come in. I said, "Jim, I can't get to your house tonight. I got these people in." And Jim would say, "Hey, bring them over with you." It was more, he said, "Bring them with you." So Jim had this get together in his basement after home games that was everybody. My mom and dad were there. They're like, my dad was a pastor. So he had those guys in, and so my mom and dad came over. I mean, everybody was over there, and it became this mythical kind of gathering, and our team became much closer because of it. And we started playing for each other, and even each other's families that we knew. We started playing for something bigger than ourselves, and it carried us through 4 pretty good years.
Love it. And one of our favorite Jim Kelly stories was at the Hall of Fame years and years ago. And the bartending staff in the hotel where all the Hall of Famers were staying, they needed help. Like there were many more patrons than folks behind the bar, and Jim decided, I'm just going to start helping this staff, and he hopped behind the bar and started serving everyone. And so this tracks is basically what I'm saying, Steve.
Well, I'll say this, that Jim cut a wide swath, and this is a true story. When Jim went in the Hall of Fame, he was a first ballot guy.
Oh, yes.
And the Hall of Fame said, "How many people do we need to accommodate for your group? How many friends are you bringing with you?" And he said 37 busloads. And they said 37 people. He goes, no, 37 busloads of people. And if you remember, that's the first year where they had to move the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies from the steps of the Hall of Fame into the stadium. That was the first time they did. And Boomer started, Chris Berman started hosting it. It became this big event.
Yep.
And they had to open it up because the entire region of Western New York showed up at Jim's induction, and they just couldn't accommodate all those people. And now it's a big deal, and they do it every year like that. But Jim was the guy who forced them to do that.
I actually didn't know that. I went to the Joe Gibbs induction in 1996, and it was on the steps of the Hall of Fame. By the time Darryl Green and Art Monk got in 2008, it was in the stadium. Obviously, Kelly got in before they did, so that's why they had it in the stadium. But, yeah, and it was at night in 2008. I think they do it in the daytime now. I'm not sure, but I think in those days they did it at night. And so that's when it all started, because he brought 37 busloads of people. By the way, the bar, do you know people have bars in their house? I guess they still do. But speaking of NFL history and bars, there's some great footage from NFL films in one of the Lombardi documentaries of he and his wife Marie hosting a cocktail party at a bar in their basement after they won the NFL championship. They didn't have the Super Bowl yet. They hadn't made it to the Super Bowl. They would later win against the Raiders, which would be Lombardi's last game as coach of the Packers. But in beating the Dallas Cowboys in the Ice Bowl in Green Bay, they that's a legendary game, but it was celebrated by Lombardi and his friends in the basement of the house. You see people smoking and drinking, and it's very 60s, very 60s. So yeah, even in the 80s and into the 90s, Jim Kelly was kind of doing the same thing with his teammates. Pretty cool. All right, coming up, what is the leash for first-round quarterbacks? It's not a very long one. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Some very interesting analysis coming up from two former NFL players who now work as TV analysts. One of them, Greg Olsen, and the other one, Ross Tucker. They had kind of different careers. The great career for Olsen and kind of a journeyman, in and out of teams. Career for Ross Tucker, but they're both very good at what they do. And this situation with the Colts with Anthony Richardson, it's really interesting. 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, he was the number 4 pick of the NFL draft, and he looked good at times starting for the Indianapolis Colts. He got hurt. He came back last year, hurt, played okay, hurt, and now it looks like they're done with him. He was beaten out by Daniel Jones. And I think because of the salary cap for rookies, 1, and 2, the number of NFL-ready quarterbacks that are coming out. They were 4 for 4 on the rookie quarterbacks who started last season, led by Jaden Daniels. And J.J. McCarthy was hurt, didn't even play in the season. He may turn out to be, in what is his first year now with Minnesota, as good as Daniels and Caleb Williams, and he may be that good. And so that's why teams are willing to move on. We'll get to more on that in a minute. But Olsen first, he was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. And they started with, and Dan is really good at this because he understands television, takes you behind the scenes on what makes an analyst really good. It's not just knowing football, it's knowing how to articulate it in the format of television. And here's how he goes through it with Greg Olsen.
How much of your job now as a broadcaster for Fox is your football knowledge, and how much of it is the ability to understand TV?
Well, I think it's a great question, because I joke with my producer and director all the time. Like, the football part, I always felt pretty good about. The football part, I felt like I always understood and I saw, and I really enjoy talking the game and formulating different storylines to present to the viewer and letting them kind of unravel in real time during the broadcast. The TV part is the part I think all of us have to learn, right? You have to learn how to go in and out of commercial breaks. You have to learn how to talk to the truck. I always joke, like, still to this point today, when I want it behind the defense, the fancy TV people call it, I want the pit, I want pit framing. I'm like, I just want behind the defense, whatever that is called, give me that. So I'm still learning some of the nuance, the terminology, where all the cameras are. And I've gotten a lot better now going into my 5th year, but, it's very interesting. The football part, I feel like that's the easy part. making that fit into a 3-hour live broadcast, talk in segments, talk in sound bites, not talking over your play-by-play, commercial breaks, ad reads. Fortunately, I've had great partners. I got Joe Davis now, who's incredible. Kevin Burkhardt before that. They handle all the TV, and I tell them I'll just do the football part. So I've been lucky in that regard.
Well, you're on a play clock too, though, when you think about it, that you might have 12 seconds to describe something, and then you got to turn it over to your play-by-play guy so he can do his job. And this is where Jim Nantz is unbelievable, because Tony will kind of color outside the line sometime, and all of a sudden, Jim's got to grab it at the last second and, go 3rd and 8, So I understand the timing part of it, but so many guys that came through ESPN, these are legendary coaches and players, and I said, you got to understand TV. And even Rodney Harrison and Tony Dungy on Football Night in America, I said, you guys are rookies. You know nothing about TV. Listen to me, and you'll do fine. You know football, but that's only part of the equation. They'd look at you, go, you just talk. I go, no. If somebody in your ear goes, hey, you got 20 seconds. Well, you don't know what 20 seconds is. Yep. In real time playing a game, you do. 20 seconds in TV, you're like, I don't know. How long am I going? You went 42 seconds. You're like, I did?
No, and you're spot on. And the voice in your ear is an adjustment. Early on in my career, the natural instinct of anybody is when someone says something to you while you're talking, you stop and you want to listen. Well, obviously you sound silly on live television if you do that. To your point about play-by-play guys, there's no such thing as a good color analyst without a good play-by-play guy. They are the heroes of all of this. They are the professionals, quote unquote. Like, they keep this train on the tracks running and give you the space and the breath and the leads to then talk about the things that they really know you're interested in or you feel good about and you want to take the broadcast. So it is more of a dance. It is a rhythm. It's ever changing. Every game has a different cadence. There's games that have 1 million penalties and 1 million commercial breaks and 1 million injuries. Those get super choppy. And then there's the dream games, which every play is a long, fluid drive. There's multiple first downs in every possession. You can really let some of these storylines unravel. You don't feel like you have to force it in because it's a 3-and-out punt commercial. So again, the part of the experience that I've enjoyed the most is the unpredictability of it, where you have a basic idea of the matchup, you have a basic idea of the flow of the game, but then once it's kicked off, no different than a player, nobody can sit there and say, I know exactly how this game's going to go, and I'm going to talk about X, Y, and Z in that order. Chances are that's going to be thrown upside down, and then you have to adjust on the fly and make it sound fun and interesting.
That's Greg Olsen on the TV part of it, and I wonder about this. He's made no bones about the fact that he'd like to get back to being on the number one team. He was bumped by Tom Brady. He understood how that works. They're paying Brady $37.5 million a year. He's going to be on the number one team. He's going to do the Super Bowl. But I would look at Chris Collinsworth, who's close to my age, and at some point NBC may sort of bump him out the door, and I would think that Greg Olsen and Mike Tirico would be a great team on Sunday Night Football. I think it'd be terrific. And off the TV, this is what's going on in the NFL and what Olsen comments on here, and this is indicative of what happens now with first-round quarterbacks. Even though you're spending a big amount of draft capital, as they call it, in the case of the Colts, they had the number 4 pick 2 years ago, and they used it for Richardson, who had played well at Florida, big quarterback, can run, all those things. And, they saw flashes in his rookie year, but he got hurt. I think he only played 5 games and had some injuries last year as well, inconsistent. And they bring in Daniel Jones, who had already washed out with the Giants. Now, Jones got to the second contract. They saw enough in Jones, and he had the good year in the last year of the deal, or the last year that they had full control, and they gave him the extension, and it didn't pan out. They cut him halfway through the season last year. He wound up with Minnesota, didn't play, and now he's with the Colts, and it's a 1-year deal, $14 million, so it's kind of a prove-it deal, although that's really good money, and so it was a head-to-head competition with Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones won the job. Now, Daniel Jones not good with the Giants last year. 10 touchdowns, 13 interceptions over the last actually 2 seasons with the Giants, getting his release. So that's not good. He's been benched, the whole thing, and now he's won the starting job. So this was Olsen on what he saw in this situation and why, after only 2 years, Anthony Richardson is 23 years old. After 2 years, they have clearly moved on.
And this is not an indictment of Anthony Richardson. I don't know the kid that well. I don't know the ins and outs behind the scenes there. But I will say this, in credit to Chris Ballard. I think the best guys in the NFL, whether it's coaches, front office personnel, general managers, when you know you've made a mistake, I think the teams that continue to double down and prolong this experiment end up finding themselves out of work. I think the best organizations understand, you know what? This was a miss. And now this is a big one, right? You take a top 5 quarterback, it sets your franchise back multiple years. But if you continue to push it down the road and said, it's going to change, and I can't admit failure, I can't admit that I was wrong, typically that blows up the entire organization, and there's another general manager there. So I do give him a little bit credit. If behind the scenes, him and Shane Steichen are saying, you know what, we missed, he's not the guy, Daniel Jones gives us a better chance to win, I almost think that's the more difficult decision, and one that if it was even close, Anthony Richardson, just because of his draft pedigree, would be the week 1 starter. So I think we see this all the time in free agency. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl, and Huff, their big free agent signing from the Jets, they paid $1 bazillion. He didn't play down the stretch. And guess what? This year, they shipped him off for pennies on the dollar to another organization. And Howie Roseman said, you know what? I missed on that one, but we're going to move on. So it's different when it's the quarterback, but the good organizations admit defeat. They admit when they were wrong, and you got to move on.
Interesting. Cameron Turner is the Colts quarterback coach. He said yesterday about the move, he said, I felt like I've tried everything I can do, and I feel like he's giving great effort in that aspect as well, talking about Anthony Richardson. I didn't think either way, one or the other. I just think that right now the consistency is not where we wanted it to be. It could be that he's just not putting in the work. What we see with Jaden Daniels is in the tape room at 5 o'clock in the morning. You heard the story of Dan Quinn looking at the practice field when it was still dark and seeing Jaden Daniels come off the field after he'd already run through his progressions in the dark on the field. There's that. That's what it takes, and they're just not getting that. Now, Ross Tucker, also an analyst for the NFL and does a variety of games, also does a podcast. His look at the Richardson situation, not all that unlike Olsen, but adds some more color to it.
The Colts thing to me is like the perfect example, okay, of the dichotomy between fans, media, and to some extent, even some scouts and front office executives versus coaches. I have seen this as long as I've been around the NFL, right? Fans, media, some front office executives, they love upside. They love physical traits. They love potential. They love guys like Anthony Richardson, right? Meanwhile, coaches, you know what they love? They love guys that they can trust, that are able to execute the concepts that they're given and that the plays that are called, guys that obviously are consistent. That's what coaches value. You know how I know this, Dan? Multiple times in my career, I was told by an assistant coach, hey, the front office hates you, like, or this guy hates you. But the coach is always like, I was never the high upside guy. I was never the traits guy. I was never someone that you get excited. Oh, yes, we have Ross Tucker and his short arms and average athleticism starting. Like, nobody ever felt that way. But the coaches, they knew I wasn't going to be the reason why we lost. I was going to do the right thing every time. They could trust me. I was going to play as hard as I possibly can. I was consistent. And ultimately, coaches have to win. It's year 3 for Shane Steichen. He needs to win this year. If he thought that Anthony Richardson would help them win more games this year, I can assure you he would be starting. He doesn't. Now remember this too, Dan. People lose sight of this. When the announcement was made yesterday, I called that Colts-Titans game for CBS last year late in the season. It had been a week or two earlier that several of the veterans had sat down with Anthony Richardson to go over with him what the standard should be and what their expectations are. This is more than halfway through his second year. DeForest Buckner and Quentin Nelson, those guys, this is out there, it's public. They had to sit down and say, listen, in walkthroughs, you need to be like this. After practice, you need to do stuff like this. Unfortunately, he's a really gifted, talented, but young, immature kid who has gotten hurt a bunch, doesn't really understand what it means to be a professional. I don't know if he knows that now or not, but Shane Steichen's not waiting around to find out, right? Like Shane Steichen's like, you know what? Daniel Jones, he can win. I saw it with the Giants. In my system, he'll win. He'll do what I ask of him. He's a pro. I'm attaching my life, my family's livelihood, my kids, where I'm going to live next year. I'm going to put more faith and trust in Daniel Jones that he'll give me a better chance to stay living in Indianapolis, Indiana next year than Richardson.
So that's the view of two different players. Both of them played offense, but that is what is going on there. And it's, again, cutting your losses. Makes me wonder about this. When Ron Rivera came here, clearly he was in agreement with Dan Snyder that they were going to give Dwayne Haskins another shot. Remember, Haskins was drafted here during the Jay Gruden era, and he had little experience in college. He'd only started 1 year at Ohio State. The coaching staff did not want him. He had gone to Bullis High School, same high school that Snyder's son went to. And as Jay said this, I mean, Snyder hops off his yacht and tells him you got to draft Dwayne Haskins. So they take him. Clearly, he's not ready to play. He doesn't have the work ethic that you need in not just on the field, but in the film room. He's not putting in the time to do that. They had Alex Smith here, and they were trying to use Alex Smith, as an example of how to do it the way he showed Patrick Mahomes the way, and that didn't happen. And so what we saw here was that they didn't cut their losses soon enough. That they took Chase Young at number 2. They weren't going to be able to draft Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was going to go number 1. Could they have maybe put together a package to move up to Cincinnati spot to take him? Maybe. But Joe Burrow had the best, or at least one of the best college seasons ever when he led LSU to the national title. But to go into that season with Dwayne Haskins as your starter, where he'd basically shown you nothing as a rookie and did some very immature things, including in a game against the Detroit Lions when he needed to go back on the field and take a knee. He was busy taking selfies with the fans. They went with him. And that's an example of where they should have said, okay, he's not our guy. He proved it in year 1. I know we spent the number 15 pick of the draft to get him. It's not working out. We got to find a quarterback. They didn't do that. Now, there were other problems in the Rivera era, many of them. But that's one of them. And finding a quarterback, as we saw last year, can make all the difference in the world. And they finally got one here. Finally. But what you hear from Ross Tucker and Greg Olson is, hey, if you know it's not working out early, don't stretch it out. And if you go into the draft next year with a high draft pick, there's going to be more quarterbacks. Because what we're getting now, because they stay longer, because there's money to stay in college, and you have more years of eligibility, they're staying around for at least 2 years of starting, sometimes 3, maybe even 4. And they come out ready to play. And the old Bill Parcells line, I'll never take a quarterback who doesn't have at least 23 college starts. And Haskins didn't have that. And others who came along and flamed out didn't have that. And we're seeing some of the results. So, it's like the Colts are like, okay, if we can win this year with Daniel Jones, fine. If we can't, we're going to take a quarterback again next year and, hope we hit big like teams did this past year. Because what we're finding is there are more quarterbacks NFL ready, seemingly, than ever before. Maybe anecdotal, but that's the way it seems for me. That's a wrap for me. Bram is coming up next. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.